whatever you may think about Andrew Jackson, now obviously everything I'm telling you is colored by my own judgments about things, and so you have to take that into account. But I'm giving you my judgment. He was an Indian leader. He was a bad man, a really bad man. When I start reading about some of the things that he did, he hated Indians and he wanted to wipe them all out. He violated a direct order from President James Monroe and came in and attacked in Florida, Spanish Florida. They just had their fill of him. And of course, Monroe went out of office. He became the first military governor of Florida. So he was like the worst thing that ever happened to the relatively calm relations that existed between the Seminoles and the non-Seminole people that worked and had to live here. And of course, when the federal troops came in, I want you to think about this. This to me is just, they come in their federal uniforms, right? And they're all spiffed up. Can you imagine being spiffed up in Florida? Can you imagine wearing uniforms of woolens? Can you imagine wearing a white leather strap, walking around here walking in this environment? They were easy targets. The Seminoles beat them every time. It was just, it wasn't even a match until the federal troops started using the plantations for garrisoning their troops, getting food, and the Native Americans, the Seminoles, believed that they had to destroy these places that the federal troops were using so as to reduce the threat. Now, they were destroying Joseph Hernandez's plantation, Mr. Long's plantation across the way, the Pelletier family plantations, the DuPont family plantations, so they had to defend and stop. Now, what they did was very interesting. They didn't go for the all-out war kind of thing that you think about in the Civil War or Indian fighting out the West. It wasn't that way. They needed to end it. They wanted to end it quickly and quietly. So they had their scouts. They knew where the Native Americans camped. And in a matter of a few days, they rounded literally all the chiefs up, virtually all of them. And the way they did it was, they would go to the encampments. General Hernandez, the guy who owned things, this was his campaign. He divided his troops into two, infantry and those mounted. The infantry guys, and then when I say infantry, that's kind of not a correct word. They just wore their normal clothes, with their normal hunting rifles. We're not talking about guys that did this kind of stuff, okay? There wasn't any, snap to and uniforms, no. And everybody had their own kind of weapons and stuff. So they would crawl into the camps at night after everybody was asleep and be right on the outskirts of the camp while the Native Americans, the Seminoles, slept. When dawn came, the other contingent would come from the other side and ride in. They would ride in and create commotion. Infantry would get up. They captured 5-6 chiefs, captured 3-4 of these major war encampments. I think there was only 1 or 2 people who lost their lives. And they brought them all in. Now there was one who wasn't brought in, Osceola. Of course, he's a legend. Now, you all know where Haw Creek is? Some of you may not know where. That's where Osceola camped. Haw Creek. Haw Creek. That's that way. To the west side. And beautiful, beautiful country there. So now, Osceola did not come in, but the federal general, Putnam was his name, he really wanted Osceola. So he told Hernandez, tell him to come in under a flag of truce. We need to powwow, because, I have all his fellow chieftains. And he came in and they arrested him. So it was a really terrible, terrible, cureless act that they had committed on him. And in the Congress, in the United States Congress, they went crazy. Putnam was not court-martialed, but he had to defend for the rest of his life what he did with Osceola. Of course, what happened to Osceola later was just absolutely terrible. He was imprisoned. He was imprisoned in the St. Augustine de Castillo. Then they took him up to a Carolinian fort where he was imprisoned. and he died in prison. And the doctor thought, because he was such a famous fellow now, he severed his head and kept his head in a jar. That's how, I mean, so you can imagine, this really grotesque attitude towards Seminoles from certain people. And of course, things burned. Bulow, the Bulow plantation, that was a major sugar mill. The largest number of slaves worked there. And that burned. They burned that. I'll tell you a little story about him. His name was Von Bulow. French. He was French. Not Von Bulow. But anyway, he was French. He was French. Von Bulow, I'm thinking German. But he was French. So he hated the Federals. Oh my gosh. He had great relations. And he had a sort of unusual lifestyle. I mean, they did a lot of partying in his place. And I don't know if you know, but he built his little ramp into the Bulow Creek. He would take his wine bottles and put them in upside down into the sand, so it was a glass ramp into the water. But anyway, he had a good time, and people enjoyed being there. Well, he hated the Federals so much that when they came to requisition his plantation to put up the troops and to eat and to whatever, he fired a cannon out. And of course, this was Putnam. And who is this uppity Frenchman or German, whatever he thought? They locked him in as punishment. They locked him in his outhouse for the duration of the federal requisition of his property. So, very kind of interesting little stories of the hammock. This is where you live, and this is what gives it its unique, you have to admit, are these unique stories? These are unique stories. Now I want to tell you a little bit about my setting here. Just real quickly. So, I've told you a little bit about people and events and stuff. Now I want to tell you about the culture of the hammock. Okay. I've already told you this. This is the Kunti. You should have it in your yard. If you don't, buy it. Really. It's a symbol that you're a Hammockian. Okay? Okay? It should be the national bush of the hammock or something like that. But you can get it in any native plant place. The Kunti. Now, the Kunti, you will, in the season, it will grow these cones. They turn bright orange. You've seen them. Don't ever touch it. Don't ever eat this. This is a poisonous plant. It's very hard, but it's poisonous. Now, what people do not know is that this plant was used by the Native Americans to make bread. To make bread. How is that? Who said that? Barbara. Of course Barbara would know that. A scientist. The roots were boiled and the poison was leached out of the roots and it made flour and it was used to make bread. It was called Indian. In the journals that were written at the time, the contemporary journal was called Indian bread stuff. That's what they called it. Indian. Do you have some Indian bread stuff? And they got it from the Kunti. So this is not just a native plant. This is a native plant that has some very unique role in our history. Also, now a medic. Clean you out. And the Seminoles would drink the black drink before they went into war. That is why, my opinion, why they were so fierce. Get out of their way if you hear that anyone is drinking the black drink. And on that note, thank you very much. On Malakoff Road, you're hurting. If you've got somebody of Hispanic descent coming to look at your property to buy it, and you tell them you live on Malakoff Road, they're going to turn around and not show up. Why? So, why is it called Malakoff? Is the Malakoff plantation that is all this land to the ocean, to the river, all the way to Washington Oaks, and all the way down, I'm going to say, right where the... What's Ginn's waterfront project? Ocean Harbor? No, not the river. Not Hammock Beach. Harbor Village. Okay, so that was Malakoff Plantation. Okay, now, nobody really knows, but I think I know. When General Hernandez bought the property in about 1815, 1820, somewhere in that time frame. He named it Malacompra. I had always thought before I knew that fact, well, it was named Malacompra because the Seminoles burned it down. No, the Seminoles burning it down occurred after it was named Malacompra. So what was he? Was he a soothsayer? Could he see into the future? No. It was the past of that land. In the 1790s, there's documentation in the record that there was a wildfire that went through here, and the name of this land, it wasn't Malacompra then, pre-Joseph Hernandez, it was called, this is what they called it, the Burnt Land. That's what it's called, the Burnt Land. Okay, now, the next thing that happened to this property was, what was next? The next thing that happened to this property was a gentleman named Josiah DuPont, by the way, from the Carolinas, had gotten a grant from the King of Spain to create a small plantation. His house is underneath the foundation of General Hernandez's over there at Baines. He was driven off by a Seminole Indian war raiding party. There was a Longs Creek, y'all know Longs Creek? That's named for a man named John Long. He had a plantation across the way. And in that Seminole uprising, John Long was killed. His slaves some of his slaves escaped, came across the river, told Josiah, beat Pete. He got out of here, and by the way, very colorful story. It was in the Charleston Gazette. He was kind of a celebrity because they were killing people, and he just got everybody. He said, "Everybody act calm. We're going to walk out of here." And he ran into the Seminole party, and he just was, zippity doo dah. Everything's really cool, and they just let him keep on going. And it was a great escape story, but he abandoned the land. So now we had wildfire, wild Indians. What's the next thing that happened? The next thing that happened is Josiah DuPont wants to come back. He wants to come back now that things are settled. He wants to resume his plantation life. The King of Spain says, no. You abandon your land. Besides, you're not Spanish. So you're out of here. You forfeit your grant. So there, by act of a monarch, the land was lost. Well, then what happened? Well, now the King of Spain had the land again, and they gave it to a gentleman named Michael Crosby, who was Irish. Now, he Catholic priest. Michael was smart. He changed his first name to Miguel. Miguel Crosby. Now, who would be fooled by that? Well, I don't know. They did. They liked it. They gave him the land, right? So now he is able to enjoy the fruit of all of Josiah DuPont's labor. Well, what happened to him? The War of 1812. He had to abandon the property due to this World War. So the land was lost again. So that was when Hernandez bought it. And I believe that steady history of forfeiture and loss is why it was called Malacompra. And maybe someday I'll write a book about it.